You know, despite being the main protagonist of the series, Michael Afton is still kind of a mysterious character. I mean, we don't even know how many games we play as him in. We can only be sure of 1, 4, and 5, but let's be honest, he is most definitely the protagonist of 6. But an even bigger question is, what is his motivation? Sure, after Sister Location, we know he wants to find his father, but for what? PJ Haywood said it was for answers, but he also said he didn't know for sure. So what? Did he want to kill William? Why? Well, today I want to talk about what I believe Mike's motives to be throughout the first 6 games. Now, I'm not sure if I'd call this a theory, more so speculation with light evidence, although I am trying to be as objective as possible with minimal headcanons. When I go into like headcanon territory, I'll be sure to tell you guys. It's only gonna be like twice anyway. And just a heads up, for this video, I'm gonna be operating under the theory Mike is Fritz. If you guys don't believe that, don't worry. I'll explain how my idea still works without that. First though, let's talk about the movie. More specifically, Vanessa in the movie. I have seen some people say that Vanessa in the movie is an adaptation of Mike from the games, even though Mike is literally the main protagonist of the movie, whatever. The thing is, I think they're right, to an extent. I think game Mike is kind of split between the two. Movie Mike has more of his backstory, you know, with the dead little brother and blaming himself for his brother's death, even though one of the two is definitely more responsible than the other. While Vanessa has more of his personality and relationship with William. At least so far, we still don't know if movie Mike is going to be revealed to be an Afton in the next ones, but I don't think so, because I've read I haven't read it, but I've seen some stuff from the novel, and if that's true, let's just say we'll have another Star Wars situation on our hands. The reason I say this is because I've seen some people say that since Vanessa in the movie knows about William's crimes, that means Mike in the games also does. I disagree with this. Although I do think Mike was working for William at one point, I also don't think he knew anything about William and the missing children until Sister Location. Well, I mean, I think he knew about the missing children, I just don't think he knew William had anything to do with it. I just wanted to say that because I've disagreed with it for a while, and this is the only time I'll be able to say it, so. Before we talk about my interpretation of Michael's motives, let's talk about the 2 most popular interpretations, Mike Hero and Mike Accomplice. Basically, Mike Hero is that Mike's main motivation is to, you know, help the spirits and do his father's work, stuff like that. Mike Accomplice is that Mike was working with William until Sister Location, and then he turned against him. Under both of these interpretations, Mike is trying to like redeem himself for the bite victim's death, who I'm just gonna call Garrett, just, you know, using different methods. Pretty much, think of it as a hero or villain route, even though under Mike Accomplice, he still isn't really a villain, but whatever, it's close enough. So you might be wondering, which one of these do I agree with? Well, my answer is neither, but also kind of both. I'll explain why. Let's start with the main clues we get from Michael's motives. The poster in FNaF 6, the Immortal and the Restless, and Michael's speech at the end of Sister Location. Let's talk about the poster first. The poster seems to depict the Afton family. A clown, a bear, and a man with a puppet that looks exactly like him. The reason I'm talking about this first is because I think it shows a sign of Michael's early motivations during FNaF 2. Basically, I think the poster is telling us William was using Michael, and I think that was during FNaF 2. I don't think it's during Sister Location, because if you think about it, Michael wasn't really doing any of William's dirty work. I know a lot of people think William sent Mike down there specifically to free Elizabeth, but I don't think that's true at all. I think he specifically sent him down there to die. I mean, think about it. Why would William want Elizabeth free? Why would he want to get rid of a test subject, especially one that's so loyal to him? And it's definitely not because he loves her, because he doesn't. He doesn't love any of his children. That's basically stated outright in the 4th closet. In the books, he literally beats his children. He beats Elizabeth, and in the books, he's really just using Elizabeth. But the books and games are a different continuity. Sure, but William's characterization stays pretty consistent. They both have basically the same motivations. They're both intelligent, they're both manipulative, and they both use their children. So basically, William doesn't really care about his kids. I think William was still planning on Elizabeth being there after Mike was done. I mean, there's even a line where it's stated Elizabeth and the others have tried to escape before, but they always get put back, so I definitely don't think William wanted to let her go.
I've been out before, but they always put me back. They always put us back inside.
Anyway, back to why I think FNaF 2 is where William used Mike. I think William realized he needed to get the remnant from the toys, not the wizards, because he gets the remnant later. Or maybe not remnant, but their parts, and then he would learn about remnant after experimenting with the parts from the toys. I mean, we don't know when he discovers remnant. Or maybe he just wanted to mess with their facial recognition. Whatever you think fits best, it doesn't really matter. But he can't just go do it. I mean, we already know he worked at the FNaF 2 location, killed those kids, he quit, and now his alias is a murder suspect, presumably. And Fazbear Entertainment would definitely recognize him, and they have the whole policy of not letting previous employees in. So now how is he going to get his parts that he needs? Well, I think this is where he realized he could use Mike to get in. I don't think he told Mike all the details though, like about the dead kids or anything like that. He probably told Mike something like, I need you to get parts for my robots, they aren't working, or something like that. And this part is a little bit more headcanon-y, but I would guess he would probably use Michael's guilt of killing Garrett against him. You know, that might not be true though, it doesn't really matter. And yeah, I know William didn't build the toys, but I doubt Mike knew that. This also explains why in FNaF 2, Mike's alias is Fritz Smith, while every other time he works at Freddy's, his alias is Mike with a different surname. Basically, William gave him the alias to be extra careful. This could also be why the alias is the Fox Foxy kid. If William knew Fritz was possessing Foxy, then he gave Mike the alias as a bit of irony. I mean, it's definitely something he would do. This also shows more of William and Mike's characters. William is very careful, except for when he's not, and Mike is less careful, still using his real name, even when he's trying not to be recognized. This is even kind of backed up in the FNaF movie, where William changes his whole name and whole identity, while Vanessa only really changes her last name but keeps her first name. Also, William sending Mike will explain how Mike knows how to survive the night without a phone call, because William told him what he would have to do. You know, he worked the night shift. And sure, the mask in the box came in after his week, but he would still probably be updated on the changes. And if you don't believe Mike is Fritz, then you could say he just heard rumors about the animatronics being able to, move around at night, or trying to kill people. He has to know something, though, and start asking William questions for later in the story. Also, if you don't believe Mike is Fritz, then you can explain the poster as either it's not the Aftons, it's just the main antagonist of FNAF 6 itself, or FNAF 1 could be when he uses Mike, I don't know, but that's just what I'm saying. So yeah, in case you don't believe Mike is Fritz. So yeah. So what now? Well, this is where I think The Immortal and the Restless comes into play. In case you don't know, The Immortal and the Restless is about this girl, Clara, trying to get this vampire, Vlad, to confess that her son is his and take responsibility for his son. Vlad continues to deny it, even though it's obviously his, until he slips up and says he bought a kid's meal. Basically meaning he does, accept the child. That's what's implied. So where does Michael come into play? Well, not only is this a show Michael watches, but he also directly talks about it in the logbook with this quote. When asked what fictional characters he relates to, Michael says this: Clara from Immortal and the Restless, because everything about this place is crazy and no one seems to notice except me. What this quote reveals to us, I think, is that Clara is a representation of Mike in this show. And Vlad? Well, he's more up for interpretation. Some think he represents Fazbear Entertainment, and that still works for what I'm going to say later. But right now I'm going to say Vlad is William. And the baby is basically, all the crimes William's committed and, the animatronics being able to move. Basically the kids possessing the animatronics is what that is. And also, let me just say real quick why I think this actually represents Mike's story and it's not just a random show for Mike to relate to. I think so because this show appeared in Sister Location. Sister Location is a very story-heavy game, and I think The Immortal and the Restless is supposed to show us kind of how Mike even got to Sister Location before it was even revealed in the custom night cutscene, kind of showing us more about what happened, just from a different perspective. So pretty much what this means is that Mike, after working a shift at FNAF 2, he saw how strange the robots were acting, and he decided to ask William questions about it, but William just kept coming up with excuses. Maybe Mike even started to connect it to the dead kids, but that doesn't really matter. It got to a point where Mike obviously knew something was up, and that is why I think he started to work at the FNAF 1 location. Now you might be wondering, why didn't he just start working there earlier? Because he couldn't, there was always a night guard, Phone Guy. But since Phone Guy dies, Mike is able to work as a night guard so he could get more personal time with the animatronics. If he just worked in the day, he might think they only act up at night, right? If he was Fritz, and if those were the rumors he was hearing. Throughout the week, I think Mike would learn for sure that they are possessed, even if he started to suspect it before. I mean, Bonnie and Chica literally moaned right outside his door. I also think those newspapers in FNAF 1 are actual newspapers Mike read throughout the week to learn more about the MCI, but that is just, that's more of a headcanon thing. So I think on night 7, Mike tampers the animatronics to get proper confirmation whether or not they're possessed. Whether or not he doesn't really matter. Mike has his suspicions now. He might even think William is the killer, or William is involved somehow. But what does he do with that? Well, in Immortal and the Restless, it's only when Clara's actions start to get more and more extreme that Vlad slips up. Even though technically, in my opinion, the most extreme action she did was burning down Vlad's house, but then her saying she's gonna sell the ring was what made Vlad slip. So, one of those is definitely more extreme than the other. But I still think it works for this. I think the extreme action was Mike working at FNAF 1, and I think William found out about that. I think Mike maybe told him, I worked at Freddy's again, I know something's up. I also think that's why Mike used an alias in FNAF 1, because I don't know what William's role would be in the company, but I still think he would be somewhat connected to Fazbear Entertainment, right? He would still be the boss of it, and I think he would know all the employees working there, even if he doesn't know them all personally. So that's why Mike would use an alias. I just want to throw that out there. But yeah, like I said, I think Mike maybe told him, he worked at Freddy's again, he knows something's up, he might even have brought up the dead kids. And then William, he's the great father he is, just oh shit, my kid knows about my crimes, now I have to kill him, great father. And I think that's when he sent him to Circus Babies. But before that, I think that William came clean. At least partially. Why? I'll talk about that later. But anyway, he asks, in quotation marks, for William to go to the Circus Babies. Basically tell him something about, he can save his sister. William didn't even know what he was talking about. I also think he tells him about the dead kids, but not that he killed them. In fact, someone else killed them, and he was even trying to help them be free. He'll help Elizabeth. I mean, Mike wanted to make up for what he did to his brother, right? That's probably more of a headcanon thing. I'll explain more why I think he told Mike about the MCI later. I also think he told Mike to get a job, he had to find an ad in a magazine. I'll discuss why I believe this later too. And then this part might be controversial, but I think right after this is when Follow Me happens. And basically, William got the remnant from the classics, Not to experiment with them, but so they will kill Mike when he works there. I mean, maybe he wants to experiment with them after. Why couldn't he trust Elizabeth to do it? Because Elizabeth does not want to kill Mike. In the entered boss fight in Sister Location, they say this when they ask why Mike won't come to the scooper with them.
I don't understand. You won't die.
And then the canon ending, we see that this is true when Elizabeth gives Michael a part of her remnant, which means she is the reason he is even alive. So basically, I think she does know it's Michael. I know a lot of people think, you know, oh no, she thought Michael was William. I do not think so. I know people think that because of what Michael said. He said, you know, this.
They didn't recognize me at first, but then they thought I was you.
I don't think he's including Elizabeth and they. I think he's just talking about the MCI. Because he refers to Elizabeth separately in that same speech. But then, why does she try to kill Mike in FNaF 6? Well, it's because she doesn't recognize him. In this death quote, when baby kills you, she says this.
You're not who I expected to see.
This means that she thought whoever was working there was just some random person. Hey guys, I had to come in here real quick again, because there's actually another quote that she says that kind of throws a wrench in this. She also says this sometimes when she kills you.
I heard your call.
Now this just throws a wrench in, like, this contradicts the game too, not just my theory. She thought William called them, right? That's like the whole, that's what's implied. So she says, I heard your call after she kills you. So now why is she trying to kill William? Why is she trying to kill William? That's a whole different question. When literally, at the end of the game, she's like, I want to make you proud, right? And then also, my quote that I brought up was, you're not who I'm expecting to see, but I don't know. So I just had to throw that in there because that's interesting. I want to see you guys think about that. I still think my idea could be right because this quote kind of goes against the game as well, but yeah. I think it was kind of interesting. This kind of reveals something about Elizabeth's character. She's basically what people think William is. Like, she's actually the one who wants to, like, keep her family alive. A lot of people think it's like William, but no, it's like Elizabeth. I think that's really interesting character. At least that's what I see it as. And another reason why I think Elizabeth knows it's actually Michael is because of this line in the entered boss fight.
I know it was an accident.
Sure, Elizabeth's death was an accident, but it seems to me like the game is implying over and over that Mike is doing what he's doing in Sister Location mostly out of guilt.
Welcome back for another night of intellectual stimulation, pivotal career choices, and self-reflection on past mistakes.
Honestly, that's like the only time I can think of, actually, so maybe it's not like, you know, doing it so excessively like I said. But still, you know, I think, you know, Elizabeth is actually talking about Garrett's death here, which, you know, was an accident. Well, I don't know what Elizabeth is thinking in this moment. Maybe she's like, Mike is scared of something going wrong with her. I'm just like spitballing on that part. But yeah, basically the point is, definitely think Elizabeth wouldn't have killed Michael. Definitely think she recognized him. Definitely think William got the remnant to kill Michael. But then there is a problem with that. Ennard says that they have tried to escape before, but they always get put back. And if my idea is true, and like Mike literally worked at Sister Location like a week after him and William had that conversation, they wouldn't have had time to escape, pretty much. So that is a problem with it. I guess we don't know how much time there was in between William and Mike talking and Michael working at Circus Babies. If it was like a month, then I could see them trying to escape. That's just what I think, though. I guess theoretically William could have already had the remnant for them, but then I don't even know how he would talk to Mike, because it seems to me everything on Follow Me happens on the same night. Follow Me is so confusing after it was like repurposed to be Molten MCI, unless maybe it wasn't, but I'll talk about that in my Follow Me 2015 video. Even though I don't believe in that theory, I still want to discuss how it could still work. Now let's talk about Mike's monologue. So remember earlier when I said Mike has to have known something about the MCI before working at the bunker? Well, it's because of this line in Mike's monologue.
They were all there.
To me, this implies that Michael knew the MCI would be there in some way. I mean, the they here has to be the MCI, right? I mean, I don't know what else it could be. But then at the end of the speech, Michael seems pretty adamant on finding William and presumably killing him, as he has no problems with him dying in 6. And if you think it's the FNaF 3 guard, and you think he burnt down Fazbear Fright, obviously he wanted to kill him there. So I was thinking, why would he be okay with William killing children at first, and then all of a sudden turn on him? But then I realized William didn't necessarily have to tell him the full truth, like I said earlier. And then how would Mike know he was the killer? Because he got injected with the MCI's remnant, and now has their memories. Well, actually, I guess that's not what happened in the books. I was about to say Carlton got injected and he got memories. That's not what happened. Remnant getting injected in you, you get the memories right. I swear to God that's something in Frights. It's been a while since I've read any Fazbear Fright stories that weren't just for a video. Swear to God that's something in Frights where you can like get the memories from the remnant or agony, something like that. Someone in the comments, please tell me. And he also got the memories of them, you know, being killed by a yellow rabbit. And I think Michael knows that Spring Bonnie is his father's, you know, preferred suit. So was able to put 2 to 2 together and realize that William lied and he did kill the children this whole time. And now, okay, this part is a little more of like a headcanon fan fiction, and this only works if Garrett dies first. But I think Mike might blame himself for the MCI's death if, you know, William did kill Charlie after Garrett died as a response to his death. And no, William does not have to care about Garrett to kill Charlie in response to it, there's this Reddit comment. Basically, William is a narcissist, and he would see basically Henry having a living child when he lost one in some sort of like personal attack. So he would, bring Henry down to his level, something like that. Basically, that's what I believe. I think it's really good. And we do know William was jealous of Henry, novels, again, I know different continuity, but no reason to think he wasn't in the games. Anyway, William killing Charlie would lead to him realizing that she possesses the puppet, which would lead to him killing the MCI, which would lead Mike to feeling guilty. That part might not be true. It actually doesn't matter if he does anyway. He's still hunting down William to kill him either way. I just thought that would be kind of cool. Also, he might want to free the spirits if you think he literally plays any role in Happiest Day at all. I think that might be possible, but I'll talk about that another day. Also, remember when I said earlier that Mike told him to find an ad in a newspaper? It's because of this line.
I found it. It was right where you said it would be.
And then the logbook, Foxy, who represents Mike, is reading the same magazine that is mentioned in sister location.
Whether you were approached at a job fair, read our ad in screws, bolts, and hairpins, or if this is the result of a dare, we welcome you.
The reason for this is because Mike actually works at the bunker, which means he would have to actually legally get a job. I don't know how long that would take, but basically William was like, they put ads in magazines. You just wait until you see one of those and apply that way. That's what I'm thinking. And also, William would have to get time to get the remnant from the MCI for the fun times, under my interpretation that he specifically got them to kill Mike. The only problem with this is that the next line, they were all there, and the there seems to be the same it from the last sentence, so I don't know. Guys, I actually found a explanation for this. It is the same, the it and the there. It's basically saying like, the bunker was right where you said it would be, and that would be in the magazine. So I was thinking like the it was the application, now it's still the bunker, basically. So yeah. And from there on out, we know the rest. Mike's main motivations for the rest of the series is to find his father, basically make him pay for everything he's done. He's basically a vigilante. Hell, in You're the Band, someone breaks into Freddy's, steals merchandise, and instead of calling the cops, he breaks into some other woman's house to get back the merchandise. So yeah, he's definitely a vigilante. So what do you guys think? I think the story I've made up for Scott Cawthon is really satisfying and makes a nice arc. Mike kills his brother, and throughout the years tries multiple different ways to make up for it. From doing what his father said to get his approval, to even investigating, the animatronics himself, maybe investigating the killer at the same time, trying to save his sister, and finally trying to stop the man truly responsible for everything. And if you think he has any role at all in Happiest Day, setting his brother and most of the important victims of his father free, and then is off doing whatever he's doing in the modern story, because I don't think Mike is dead. But sorry, the M. Afton thing is enough for me, and I need more Mike content anyway. I pray every night to Scott Cawthon that Mike is alive and Vanessa's his daughter.
I come before you today, humbled and humiliated, to ask you for one thing. I want you to
bring back Michael Afton and make Vanessa his daughter.
The FNaF 3 protagonist is a heavily debated topic, but if you clicked on this video, you most likely already know that. I've already discussed the identity of who the protagonist is at length in my FNaF 3 guard breakdown video, which I recommend you watch before this one, because this video is basically a sequel to that. You don't need to, but I'd like you to, because I get more watch time. I'm pretty happy with that video overall, except for the part where I said Mike was always the protagonist of all 3 games. Probably around FNaF 4 is where I think he retroactively became the protagonist of all the games. In case you didn't watch that video, basically, I think that Hudson and Mike both have a good chance of being the guard. However, I think Mike beats him out because of the phantom versions of Freddy and especially Foxy being the withered versions, which cannot be explained from the props in the building like the other phantoms. It probably also has something to do with Fazbear Fright itself, because there are no phantoms in FNAF 6, which makes no sense no matter who the guard is, unless it's tied to the location of Fazbear Fright somehow. Maybe the agony from the location with all the Freddy parts from the past being in one place. Probably the same reason Shadow Freddy is there, the agony. Anyway, side tangent out of the way, I think Mike's the guard. But something I proposed at the end of that video was the possibility that both Mike and Hudson worked at Fazbear Fright. And today I want to go over that theory more in depth, because I only talked about it for 2 minutes in that last video, and it was right at the end. So with that said, let's move on to the basic concept. Now, I think this is going to make a lot of Hudson guarders happy, because under this idea, Hudson is the night guard. Theoretically, Mike could be the guard, but the basic idea spawns from what we found, and Hudson is the night guard in that story. So it would be weird for him not to be the guard if I'm going to base the idea off of what we found anyway. When I read what we found for my Fright Guard video, one character stood out to me. Virgil, an older security guard who works the day shift at Fazbear Fright. Right away, I thought of Mike, because at the time of what we found in FNAF 3, Mike would be an older guy, in his late 40s to early 50s in 2023, if that's when FNAF 3 takes place. Now, I'm not sure if it's ever stated how much older Virgil is compared to Hudson, who is only 23. If Virgil's only in his early 30s, that could be considered old to Hudson, or older, but still caught my eye. Even if Virgil's in his 30s, a security guard that's older than the rest is still interesting to include. That's what I thought. Already already this theory was starting to brew in my mind. And then I got more evidence when I started looking at the logbook. Me and the logbook are kind of in a weird spot right now. I do think it's meta, right? Probably meta. However, I do also think it probably has a time it takes place. I don't think it's like something that just like happens over multiple years. I think there is a set time it takes place. When is that? I don't know. Definitely after Sister Location, but I'm not sure if it takes place during FNaF 3 or not. The fact it is said to be made by Fazbear Entertainment seems to imply that, okay, yeah, the Fright crew didn't make this. But then again, Phone Dude has that line of wanting the place to feel authentic.
It'll make it feel really authentic, I think.
And the fact that the logbook is an activity book makes me think that, you know, okay, this is some prop that was used at Fazbear Frights for the actual night guard actor or something. But then the Springlock quiz comes in, it's a whole mess. There's also the possibility that Fazbear Entertainment could have a role in Fazbear Fright, in that it was an earlier attempt to rebrand like in Help Wanted, but that's just speculation. However, I still think the FNaF 3 references are not something to be overlooked. Let's talk about Logbook Foxy and why I still believe he represents Mike and not Phone Guy. My reasoning stays the same as in my last video, the magazine. But let's go deeper. Now, a common belief I see is that the magazine is just a reference to Sister Location. That's valid to think. I mean, that's true. It is a reference to Sister Location. I mean, Mike didn't actually get the job at Circus Babies because of the magazine, right? Well, actually, okay, hear me out. Did Mike work at the bunk because of the magazine? Of course not. However, what I think a lot of people forget is that Mike does actually legally work at the bunker. He can be fired,
That you will be promptly rescued, fired, then sent home.
have his pay deducted.
It's worth mentioning that due to your lackluster performance yesterday, your pay has been decreased by a substantial amount.
And he also gets his rewards at the end of the week. He is a real employee, so he would have to apply for the job, and I think he did that from the magazine. Also, while we're on the topic again, I just want to say headcanon I developed literally when writing the script. Basically, all the potential reasons Hand Unit said for Mike working at Circus Babies are actually sort of the reasons Mike worked at the Freddy's locations.
Whether you were approached at a job fair, read our ad in screws, bolts, and hairpins, or if this is the result of a dare, we welcome you.
Anyway, yeah, I just want to throw that out there. Probably isn't canon, but it's a cool idea. Anyway, back to Logbook Foxy. Another reason I think Mike is Foxy is because of him being a security guard. And while yes, Phone Guy was a security guard and his tapes were played in the FNaF 3 office, he was not a security guard during those tapes. That was not what he was. As far as we know, he was some sort of trainer. Now, what about Phone Guy's quotes in the logbook? That is a good point. My first idea is that these are things Mike is saying to himself. Basically, now he's getting the hang of the job and is asking himself what is he still doing at Fazbear Fright, because he hasn't got any leads on William yet. I also have another explanation that I'll get to later. Another reason I believe Mike to have worked at Fazbear Fright is because I'm 95% sure Mike burned down Fazbear Fright. First off, I'm sure the fire was not an accident. Not only the mention of foul play, but also the fact that it hasn't been ruled out. Seems to me that's basically telling us, yeah, it's not just faulty wiring. Now, Hudson Guard has his own explanation to this that I didn't know at the time, which is Hudson burned down Fazbear Fright basically because he couldn't handle going up against Springtrap and the Phantoms anymore, which makes sense and is actually pretty narratively satisfying for the game itself. However, what really pushes me to think Mike is actually the one who burned it down is the Immortal and the Restless. I've talked about the Immortal and the Restless multiple times on this channel. Clara, we know she's Mike from the logbook, burns down Vlad, who represents either Fazbear Entertainment or William. Probably William though, because this came from Sister Location, which was a very Afton family heavy game. She burns down Vlad's house. So basically Mike burns down William's house is basically what happened. You could argue that this is FNaF 6, but the problem with that is that Mike didn't know about Henry's plan, and also Henry was the one to set the FNaF 6 fire. Now I could be looking too far into this, but I think judging from how the fires are very important in the series, and how the final cutscene of the game is the charred remains of Fazbear Fright, I think Scott could be implying that, yeah, Mike did burn down Fazbear Fright. Oh yeah, the cutscene. Let's talk about it. I don't really have much to say about this cutscene, except I think some people forget this cutscene has multiple interpretations, and we don't know which one is correct. Like, I've seen people on both sides act like this cutscene is the most important piece of evidence for both sides, when it's really not. The two main interpretations of this cutscene is that Mike is saying that he plans to find William, while the visuals show that the fire is the outcome of him finding William. So it's like what he's saying, what he's planning, and then the outcome of his plan. The other interpretation is that the fire is what will eventually lead Michael to find William in FNaF 6. It's impossible to know which interpretation is correct, because we don't know who the guard is. I'm sure you guys have figured out by now. I believe the first one, but I can see the logic in the second. Anyway, I just want to rant about that because it kind of fucking pisses me off, I can't lie. I just see people act like it's some sort of gospel when it's really, really not. It's all up for interpretation. Oh, another fucking rant, don't worry. Let's talk about William's line in FFPS.
You may not recognize me at first, but I assure you, that's still me.
A lot of people take this line to mean Mike could not have seen William before Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator. I don't know why I said the full version this time, because why wouldn't he recognize his father? I already think I explained why this isn't really a good piece of evidence in my previous video, so I'll just play that here. But guys, come on, look at them. We have people who still think they're completely different characters.
Springtrap is Burn Trap, but is not Scrap Trap.
Also, William isn't even saying that Mike wouldn't recognize him. He's just saying it's a possibility. You know why he's saying that? Because they look entirely different. It's not like we know for sure if Mike recognizes him or not, because he doesn't get a say in the matter at all. Also, if we really want to use FNaF 6 lines as evidence, let's take a look at another Afton line.
That was easier than I thought it would be.
This line implies that William has tried to kill Mike before, and it was challenging for him. Or at least he knows what Mike is capable of. We have no reason to think William knows what Mike has lived through. Even if you believe he sent Mike to work at FNaF 1 and 2, he still wouldn't have known how difficult those nights were. The only time he would know for sure is if Mike was in FNaF 3 and he gave him a hard time trying to kill him. Although I guess Mike did survive Sister Location, which William sent him to, most likely knowing he was going to die. But even then, he wouldn't know if Sister Location was challenging for Mike or not because he wasn't there. But something else I thought about is that this line kind of implies the opposite, because here's the thing. Last time Mike saw William, he was a normal person, right? And now, before him, he sees a corpse in a rabbit suit. I don't know how he'd have the chance to recognize William at all at this point, unless he already saw William in the Springtrap suit. Think about it from Mike's perspective. Last time you saw your dad, he was a normal person and alive. And now you see a corpse in a rabbit suit. And it's not even your dad's fucking suit, because Scraptrap's suit was completely different. You wouldn't just naturally jump to, yep, that's my dad. However, you might think that this rabbit with the corpse in it is the same as the other one, which did have your dad's corpse in it. But they do look completely different, so you're not sure. But then he basically confirms it by saying, yeah, it's me. Anyway, that's my basic point, is that if William thought Mike could recognize him in the first place, that probably means he has at least seen him as Springtrap. I don't know if that makes any sense to anyone else but me, but I just wanted to, throw that out there. Now back to the logbook. Yeah, the pacing of this video is all fucked up. Let's assume logbook 23 just for a moment. And Mike filled out the logbook in 2023, right before FNaF 3. Something that I'm genuinely surprised I've never seen anyone talk about is the very first page of the logbook, where Mike's name is crossed out with a note saying, looks like someone already wrote in this. You don't mind, right? The way to interpret this, under the theory I'm proposing that both Mike and Hudson worked at Fazbear Fright, is that he worked the night shift, but now he doesn't. And the next night guard got his logbook that he filled out before. And where would Mike go instead? The day shift, like Virgil in What We Found. Or he quit, but let's just go with the day shift for now. And this is only if you believe logbook 23, which I don't believe anymore, but I just thought it was important to throw in there. Using this, we could also say that the phone guy quotes are things Mike is saying to Hudson. As we know, Virgil and Hudson talked when they were switching positions, so if this theory is true, Mike and Hudson most likely would as well. So just to recap real quick. The theory is that while Hudson is the FNaF 3 player, Mike did work at Fazbear Fright as a day guard. Mike is the day guard, and he works alongside Hudson, who works the nights. This theory works well if you think Mike plays any role in Happiest Day, as instead of doing the minigames at night, he does them in the day. Now, a question you might be asking is, why does Mike wait 5 nights before burning down Fazbear Fright? Well, that's because it's a video game. Like, really, that's the only reason that makes sense. Same reason Hudson doesn't try to leave on the first night when Springtrap appears like he does in What We Found, because What We Found is a story and FNaF 3 is a game. I also want to talk about the possibility that both Mike and Hudson are the players in FNaF 3, and that after night 2, they switch. So the idea is that after Hudson's first night against Springtrap, he tells Mike when they're switching positions about Springtrap. Is like, wow, this guy, this rabbit, came alive at night, and like he was trying to get into my office, I guess. And Mike is like, wow, that sounds stressful, I can take over for you. Something like that. The only real evidence for this is that in What We Found, Hudson only goes up against Springtrap for 1 night. So after he dies in the story, Virgil will most likely take up the night guard role. And in FNaF 3, if you believe Phone Dude to be Delane, then you could say he stops calling the player because they aren't his friend Hudson. They're just fucking random old guy. I find this really unlikely though, because there's never been a FNaF game where we switch protagonists without an indication of it, like in FNaF 2 with the different names on the paychecks. Okay, so let's talk about some problems with this theory. First of all, there's absolutely no way this is what Scott was intending when making FNaF 3. He was definitely not thinking, yes, I will have the night guard from the first game actually be the day guard, the unseen day guard, who burns down the location at the end of the game. And the protagonist of this game will just be some random guy. However, it could retroactively become that as time went on. And also, about using the Immortal and the Restless as evidence for Mike burning down Fazbear Fright. A problem arises when we take into account what happens next after that in the show. Vlad and Clara actually make up, which is not what happens with Mike and William after the FNaF 3 fire. I guess you could say, though, that it shouldn't be taken so literally, and the TV show is showing Mike burning William's house. It's basically supposed to be a hint to Mike burning down William's house, which would be Fazbear Fright, because that's where William lives. But, that's a whole thing. That's what I think, though. And about Virgil, the man who spawned this whole idea in the first place. The thing with him is that he might not matter at all, because Scott probably did not write What We Found. Now, he could have made a request to the author of the story to include an older security guard, but we don't actually know what he told the author, so that's just pure speculation. I still think the inclusion of an older security guard could mean something, but
maybe it doesn't mean anything at all. Maybe it doesn't mean anything at all.
So when all is said and done, do I believe this theory? No, not really. I think it's a cool idea, but it does kind of rely on stretches, in my opinion. Honestly, I still think the FNaF 3 protagonist is Mike, mostly because I hate FNaF 6 as Mike and William's first confrontation. FNaF 3 is a boss fight against Springtrap, and in FNaF 6, he's just a basic enemy. I hate it as their final one too, but at least they would have a better first one under Mike guard. Sure, Hudson existing and not being the FNaF 3 guard in the main continuity is weird, but I don't really care. I'm gonna hang on to Mike Fred guard for as long as possible. I mean, I can sort of understand why people like Hudson being the guard. William going after just some random person is cool, but I think it works better as a short story like what we found. If you're new to the FNaF community and you want to play the games themselves, you're probably wondering, should I play the games in release order or chronological order? And you should probably play them in release order, but I know you want to enjoy the story in the chronological order, and I'm the same way. I played Red Dead Redemption 2 before Red Dead Redemption 1, so I definitely understand. But with that comes another question: what is the chronological order for the Five Nights at Freddy's games? If you're new here, you might not know that the timeline is heavily debated. So if you go on the internet, you'll see multiple different answers for the chronological order. Some people say to play FNaF 4 first, some people say to play FNaF Sister Location first. Today, I thought I'd help you guys figure out which order you should play the games in. I'll just tell you right now, don't play either FNaF 4 or Sister Location first. And also, I just want to say right now, I'm talking about just the main games, not any of the spin-offs. You can figure that out yourself, I guess. I'm also talking about just the main gameplay, not any of the mini games, because then this video would be very convoluted. So with that, let's just get into our first game, which is... First game you want to play is actually FNaF 2, since it's the earliest game in the timeline, obviously. It takes place in 1987, and none of the other games take place any earlier than this, despite what some people would have you believe. We know this game takes place in 1987 because it literally says it. And then after that, the next game you want to play is FNaF 1. FNaF 1 takes place in either 1992 or 1993, it doesn't really matter. The reason people think it takes place in 1992 is because it lines up more with the FNaF 2 paycheck. In that game, Jeremy's work week lasts from Sunday till Thursday, so FNaF 1, it could be the same thing. 1993 comes from the idea that Scott didn't have a set date when making this game, and most likely just went with what the community thought at the time, which is what I think the game takes place in 1993. It doesn't really matter though, since either way it takes place after FNaF 2, but before all the rest of these games. So from here is where it gets a little more complicated for these next two games I'm going to talk about, because we don't really know for sure when they happen. There's a set point in the timeline for FNaF 3, and both these games take place before that or after it. So I'm just going to say what I currently believe. So I think the next game you should play after FNaF 1 is actually FNaF Sister Location. Alright, since the timeline placement for this game is heavily debated, with some people saying it happens before FNaF 2, let me explain why I'm placing it here. So first off, we know this game has to take place at least after FNaF 2 because of something Mike says in the game.
They didn't recognize me at first, but then they thought I was you.
This line implies that Mike expected it to be recognized by them, who is most likely the souls of the children who were in the original animatronics, found themselves in the fun times. So that places it at least after FNaF 2, if Mike is Jeremy or Fritz, which is not confirmed. So if he isn't either of them, it has to be after FNaF 1. And I just want to say right now, no, the odor doesn't matter, since Phone Guy says himself that the animatronics smell awful.
The idea at first was to repair them. They even started retrofitting them with some of the newer technology, but they were just so ugly, you know, and the smell.
So Fritz tampering with the animatronics would, make him smell bad. Also, Follow Me has to happen before Sister Location, and that has to happen after FNaF 1, because of the fact that the animatronic shells in FNaF 3 are the same as they were after being destroyed in Follow Me, and also the endoskeletons of the classics were most likely taken so that the MCI could be injected in the fun times. Also, in the Steam description of FNaF 3, it says that only the animatronic shells were found, not the endoskeleton, so obviously that had to be taken, so they couldn't be used. They couldn't be rebuilt to be used in FNaF 1, so that means it has to be after that. Also, the building in Follow Me is obviously abandoned, so that places it, after FNaF 1. And no, the whole button thing doesn't matter. In the Follow Me minigames, Bonnie and Freddy have buttons when they shouldn't have that many. This does not matter. Spring Bonnie doesn't have a button either, but Spring Trap does. So that just proves, it doesn't really matter. So that's why I'm placing Sister Location after FNaF 1. The reason I'm placing it before FNaF 3 is because it just doesn't make sense for Mike to wait so many years after William's disappearance to go do the events of this game. Unless Follow Me happens like the week before FNaF 3, but that's unlikely. Then after that, I think the next game you should play is FNaF 4. The reason I'm placing it here is because we know it has to be at least after FNaF 1, since Phone Guy's Night 1 phone call can be heard in this game. And I'm placing it after sister location because of the survival logbook. We don't know when the logbook takes place, or if it's even a real thing in universe, but it has to be after sister location. And in the logbook, Mike draws Nightmare Fredbear under a section asking about recent dreams. Although, it really doesn't matter when you play this game. You can play this game before sister location or after FNaF 3 and nothing really changes, but I'm just placing it here. This is just where I think it probably takes place, most likely. And then after that, the next game you want to play is FNaF 3. This game takes place in either 2022 or 2023, depending on when FNaF 1 takes place, or 2017 or 2015. Yeah, there's actually a debate about when this game takes place. With some people saying, you know, it's 30 years after FNaF 1, after that Freddy's closed. So some people argue it could be 30 years after the closure of the 1985 Freddy's, or 30 years after the FNaF 2 Freddy's. Mostly due to something in the survival logbook, but I'm not getting into all of that right now, because it doesn't really matter at all. Me, personally, I think it happens 2023. Then after that, you want to play FNaF 6. It's after all the other games because characters from those games appear in states that they couldn't have been in until after the games they're in, and also it's confirmed to be after all those games. So this game most likely happens in 2023 because of HRY 223. And while 223 probably doesn't mean 2023 in universe, it's definitely supposed to be a clue for us, as 2023 was already the most commonly believed date in the community for when FNaF 3 took place. And if Scott wanted to imply it took place at a different date, he would have made it HRY 215 or HRY 217. And then after that, you want to play UCN. We know UCN is after FNaF 6 because characters from that game appear in this game, and this game acts as an epilogue for the original saga. This game also probably takes place over the course of multiple years. And then after this, if you want to, it's not confirmed if it's canon or not, but you could read the Stitch line. I personally think it's canon, but it's not confirmed, and it's not really necessary for the story. But yeah, I would read that. And then from here, it's actually easy to play the game's chronological order because, well, it's the release order. The release order is the chronological order. Help 1 and its Curse of Dreadbear DLC take place after FNaF 6 because plushies of Scrap Baby are in the game, a character from FNaF 6. Then after that, you want to play Security Breach. Security Breach takes place after Help Wanted because of a secret in Help Wanted showing the construction of the Pizzaplex, the place where this game takes place. And also the main antagonist and protagonist from the last game are in this game, but they'll hold off on the DLC at this point. Also, I would say after Security Breach, I would read the Tales from the Pizzaplex books because they're kind of necessary to understand what the fuck is happening in this game, but if you don't want to, then you can find summaries on YouTube. After you read Tales, play Help Wanted 2, since Help Wanted 2 happens after Security Breach, but it takes place before the events of Ruin, because the events of this game lead up to that DLC. And then after that, you can play Ruin. You know, that's the current final point in the timeline chronologically. Like, Charlie Emily's murder is one of the most talked about events in the FNaF franchise, mostly because of the debate about who dies first, the bite victim or Charlie. But that's not what I'm talking about today. What I want to talk about is actually when Charlie dies, like the year. Most people agree that Charlie was William Afton's first murder, but is that true? That's what I want to talk about today. Basically, what year did Charlie die? 1983 or 1985? Before the MCI or after? And also, I know that technically Charlie can die in 1985 and before the MCI, but for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to be treating Charlie 85 as Charlie dying after the MCI. So 1983 means before, 1985 means after. First, let's talk about Charlie's death itself. We see this event twice. Once in FNaF 2, and an updated, more accurate version in FNaF 6. With these, we can figure out what's going on pretty easily. Late one night at a Fazbear location, Charlie Emily was locked outside by some kids. The security puppet, a machine designed to protect Charlie, was trapped under some boxes. Eventually, William drove up and killed Charlie, dragging her body into the alley. Conveniently, the security puppet managed to escape the box and went outside, flying, I guess. Then it found Charlie after William already drove away, and because of the rain, it malfunctions and lays down next to Charlie, and then Charlie possesses the puppet. Now that we're caught up to speed on the events of her death, let's talk about when she dies. Let's start with 1983 because it's the most popular theory. There's a lot of evidence for this, so let's get into it. First of all, there's of course the novels where Charlie dies in 1983 and is William's first victim, but to be fair, the novels are a different continuity with lots of differences. That's okay though, because there's plenty of evidence in the games. In Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator, Henry says this:
"It keeps me awake at night. I could make myself sleep, but not yet. Not until I undo what he has done and heal this wound. A wound first inflicted on me, but then one that I let bleed out to cause all of this."
This implies that William killed Charlie first, because Henry said it was a wound first inflicted on him, you know. In Help Wanted 2, you can unlock the puppet memory by typing in 1983 on the keypad in the sister location office. Another piece of evidence is that when FNaF 2 came out, Scott said MatPat got almost everything right, and then later clarified one of the things he got wrong was Purple Guy being Phone Guy. In this video, Matt says that the kid who possesses the puppet was the first victim. More evidence is give gifts, give life, where the puppet is already possessed while the others are not. The main evidence for Charlie 85 comes from Help Wanted 2. In the Princess Quest 4 minigame, the order you have to do to unlock the secret Bonnie mask has Charlie as the last one you light up, with Chica being the first. This fits with Withered Chica's line in UCN. More evidence comes from Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator, where during Charlie's death, posters can be seen which look like wanted posters. This person may be William. There's also Into the Pit, which has 6 victims in the MCI, the 6 of which may be Charlie. But I'm gonna be honest with you guys, this is totally Andrew. Fetcher's in the game, Fetcher's possessed by Andrew. There's a secret code in the game which spells out always watching, which is a phrase heavily connected with the vengeful spirit from UCN, who Andrew is in the Fazbear Fright book. This game is based off of Fazbear's Fright. So yeah, 6 bodies, definitely Andrew. So with all the evidence for both theories out of the way, let's talk about some problems with each of them. Charlie 83's big problem is the Princess Quest 4 graves, which seem to be the order the kids died in. Although that's not confirmed, there are alternate explanations for the graves. For example, they could be the order in which the spirits were freed. And if you look at the puppet's mask during Happiest Day, Charlie's mask falls the slowest and hits the floor last. And in the Stitch Ray Stingers, Charlie seems to be the last one to move on, sticking around until William dies. Charlie 85 has more problems. Henry's line. Now, I have heard some possible explanations for this. One of which is that Henry is talking about Sammy, and that William killed Sammy first in the games for some reason. I think this is unlikely because Henry never mentions Sammy, like, directly again, and William never killed Sammy in the novels. Another explanation is that Henry is referring to the MCI, and William did the MCI to ruin Freddy's brand, to hurt Henry, I think. Even though that's his company too, and he reuses the characters in personal projects, I don't think that one really works. Another huge problem is the way you get the puppet plush in Help Wanted 2. Now look, 1983 is a reference to Sister Location, I know that, but the character specifically is the puppet, and I'm pretty sure that's on purpose. The MCI dies in 1985, but if the code didn't really matter, they could have had any other character be the plushie you get for this code, or find some other way to get the plush. But they didn't. They specifically chose the puppet, and I believe that was intentional to show Charlie died in 1983. Another huge problem with Charlie 85 is, of course, Give Gifts His Life. Charlie is already possessing the puppet, but none of the other ones are possessed. Although I have seen some people say that they just weren't possessed until Charlie did whatever she did in Give Gifts His Life. So she was possessed first, but died last. That's possible, I guess. I don't really have anything. That's valid. So, as you can probably tell, I do believe it's Charlie 83. I think the evidence for it is much stronger. Henry's line makes more sense, and overall, it makes more sense with what we know about William's character from the novels, where he only did the MCI to recreate what happened with Charlie. Obviously, the motive in the game has to be different because of the bite victim and stuff, but yeah. Also, in the movies, William killed someone before the MCI, Garrett. Also, something else worth pointing out is that in the novels, Charlie didn't originally die in 1983. She died in 1982. Now, why would Scott retcon this for absolutely no reason unless it carried over to the games as well, and that is also when Charlie died in the games. Not 1982, not 1985, but 1983. He changed it in the novels to line up better with the games, which would be odd because the novels are their own separate continuity. If he wanted to show Charlie died in 1983 for sure, he would retcon it in the novels just to show it happened, right? I think that's probably one of the best pieces of evidence here, not only Charlie dying in 1983, but probably also bite victim first, because think about it, if Charlie died in 1982, she could die before the bite victim just fine, but if she doesn't, then, but for some reason Scott felt the need to retcon it to 1983, which would really only make sense if the bite victim died first. If you've watched my channel, you probably know I am a huge defender of the Mike Fritz theory. The theory that Michael Afton is Fritz Smith from FNaF 2. It's a theory that practically everyone believes. I've made 2 videos going over this theory and why I believe it, one of which took me months to make. However, I don't believe it anymore. That's right, Mike Fritz's biggest defender is no longer defending it. You might be wondering, what made you stop believing this theory? And well, I admit it might be nothing, but I'm pretty certain it probably is something. Recently, I was looking through the survival logbook. While I was looking through the book, I noticed something. As we all know, Foxy acts as the security guard in this book, almost definitely representing Mike, but we'll talk about that later. But I noticed something else. He isn't the only security guard. There are 2 more. Bonnie and Freddy are also shown to be security guards. This, to me, seems to imply that there are 3 security guards that you play as in the games. Why? Well, here's what we have to remember. The logbook is basically an add-on for FFPS, made to confirm who the 6th grade student is, lore keeper ending. As we know, FFPS was made to clear things up, and I see no reason why this wouldn't carry over to the logbook as well. For example, this book clears up if Mike is the Foxy bro or the bite victim by having Mike be represented by Foxy and having the bite victim talk throughout. It also clears up that Mike is the one we play as in FNaF 4. I think the logbook was basically supposed to clear up things FFPS couldn't, or at the very least it does have lore relevant details in it. And because of that, I think having 3 security guards was an intentional detail requested by Scott. I think the third one is Fritz, since the logbook already has Foxy, who is Mike as the FNaF 3 guard, so the FNaF 3 guard is already represented. And let me explain why we know Foxy definitely represents Mike and not Phone Guy, who is named Ralph if you didn't know, as revealed in the week before. Foxy representing Ralph is a kind of a popular idea. I mean, Foxy being Mike is definitely more popular, but I still see Ralph every once in a while. The evidence for Ralph is that in FNaF 2, Ralph says Foxy is his favorite, which is reinforced in the week before. Also, some of the quotes on the night pages are similar to stuff Phone Guy would say. You know, what are you still doing here? Whatever else he says, I forgot. And Ralph being in the FNaF 3 office kinda makes sense because his tapes were played in FNaF 3, just ignore that he wasn't a night guard when those tapes were recorded. However, I think it's more likely Foxy is supposed to be Mike, and here's why. Foxy acts as the protagonist of the book, which Mike is. You know, he's the one who writes it and everything. The best evidence for Foxy being Mike is that on the first night page, Foxy is seen reading a magazine in a chair, which is obviously not an office chair, implying this is at Foxy's home and is applying for the job. The magazine is also a sister location reference. It's a Screw, Bolts, and Hairpins magazine, which was a magazine mentioned in sister location as one of the possible reasons Mike took the job. I guess this is showing how Mike got the job at Freddy's, you know, via this magazine. Which Freddy's? Take your pick. Also, something else to call out is that on the cover, there are 2 Freddys. Could this be another Jeremy and Fritz reference? You know, they were the night guards before Mike, and it's like where you got the night shift? I don't know. They do wear Freddy masks in FNaF 2. Like I said, I don't know. Anyway, yeah, it's pretty likely Foxy is Mike and not Ralph. And again, this makes sense since Scott would want to clarify, you know, Mike is the Foxy bro, not the bite victim. And especially when you remember that this book also confirms Mike is the FNaF 4 player. So it's definitely possible Scott considered people would be confused and think Mike is the bite victim, which did end up happening. So clearly, you know, whatever you want to do didn't actually work. The reason I think Freddy and Bonnie are supposed to be Jeremy and Fritz is simply because they're the other 2 security guards in the series that we play as, at least. And also, they're in a pair, and Jeremy and Fritz are like a pair, right? They were the 2 security guards that play as in FNaF 2. There's never been another game where we have 2 protagonists. Unless you want to count the minigame. But yeah, Jeremy and Fritz are basically a pair. Bonnie and Freddy are a pair, and they're both security guards. I think there's a connection. There might even be a deeper connection. As we know, the missing kid named Jeremy possesses Bonnie. Now the missing kid Fritz doesn't possess Freddy, he possesses Foxy. But obviously Foxy can't be used to represent Fritz, since Foxy is already used for Mike. Freddy is the next best option since Fritz wears a Freddy mask in FNaF 2. Also, fun fact, Fritz is actually short for Frederick, and Freddy is also a nickname for Frederick. Although, I'm gonna be real, Scott did not consider this. If you did, why wouldn't Fritz MCI be Freddy? I'm pretty sure Fritz Smith is Freddy because, you know, Freddy's the next best option to represent him after Foxy. Bonnie and Freddy are also the other 2 male animatronics in the band. So, unfortunately, Fritz Smith being a girl is debunked, so fuck you, Scott Cawthon. So yeah, Fritz Smith is not Michael Afton. But it seems like Mike is the FNaF 3 guard, since, you know, Foxy's in the FNaF 3 office. If you believe the theory that Fritz Smith is the phone dude, you could use this part of the logbook where Freddy is talking to Foxy in the FNaF 3 office as evidence for it, I guess. Because, you know, that's what phone dude would do, basically, like, talk to Mike on the phone. Obviously, Freddy's not on the phone, but, you know, kind of connection, I guess. But I'm always going to be a hardcore Cassie's dad phone dude truther. There's just one thing that makes me doubt Mike being the guard in 3, and that is Hudson Foster's existence. In case you don't know who this is, Hudson is the main protagonist of the Fazbear's Fright story, What We Found. He was a security guard for Fazbear's Fright. He killed his abusive stepdad and his mom in a house fire when he was younger. During his night shift, he goes up against Springtrap while facing hallucinations caused by him. In the end, Hudson burns alive in an oven. Go watch my FNaF 3 guard breakdown video. I explain What We Found a lot better than that. This is just a quick rundown. So you might be wondering, what about this makes you doubt Mike being the guard? Remember, Fazbear's Frights was made to fill in blanks from the past. Scott said this, and he even said it will go against things the community likes. Andrew's the one you should have killed. And then we have a whole story about a night guard at a horror attraction, Fazbear's Fright, who encounters Springtrap, and the book even gives Hudson fire-related trauma, which could explain why the Phantoms are burnt in FNaF 3. Why would this be written if it wasn't trying to say this guy Hudson was the guard? And even if it's in a new continuity, it's not uncommon for characters to carry over from the book to the games, you know, like Henry or Charlie. Or in the movie, Mike is still Mike. He's still the FNaF 1 guard, Mike. Even though the movie has completely different events to the game, that is still the same character, Mike Schmidt from FNaF 1. So it is possible that Hudson Foster is still Hudson Foster from FNaF 3, even with what we found numerous differences between it and FNaF 3. You know, for instance, the building doesn't burn down, Hudson dies on his first night against Springtrap, and a lot more stuff too. So why does the story exist, if not to show Hudson as the guard? Well, I'm not sure, but I have a couple ideas. You guys might not know this, but FNaF 3 is one of Scott's favorite games, so it's possible he just want to write a story based off of it. It could have also been made to explain the Phantoms, but with a different protagonist than the one in the game. I mean, the Phantoms Hudson's experiences are different. They're not burnt, and he hears his abusive stepfather's voice along with other voices, compared to FNaF 3 where that doesn't happen. Then we come to Hudson himself. Why would he exist if he isn't the guard? What stopped Scott from just writing the book about Mike? Some people say it might have been too complicated to make the story about Mike, which is true, but still, you know, Scott definitely could have done it. So why would Hudson exist if he's not the guard? And honestly, I'm not sure. But it's not the first time a new character has taken over the role of another in a different continuity. For example, Michael Brooks is Golden Freddy in the novels, while he isn't in the games. There's also Abby. She takes the role of Mike's younger sister in the movies, which Elizabeth is in the games, but Abby's probably not Elizabeth. These characters replace characters from the game's continuity because they fit the story Scott wanted to tell better. Could this apply to Hudson? Maybe, but at the same time, there's a possibility that both FNaF 3 and What We Found are canon. What do I mean? You guys know how both the Into the Pit short story and Into the Pit game are canon, but the game is probably the actual events. The same may be true with What We Found. And while the Into the Pit story and game have some massive differences, changing the protagonist seems a bit much. But then again, what I just said, we don't even know if that's true, it's just an idea. You know, the difference is Into the Pit is a game based off a book, What We Found is a book based off of a game. So, you know, it is kind of a different situation. All of this points towards Hudson. But then the logbook literally has Mike in the FNaF 3 office. And I've yet to hear a good defense for this besides, it's just a mistake, but I doubt that. The office shows up multiple times, even in non-night related sections. I'm sure Scott would have noticed that at some point, and, you know, he could have said like, oh no, wrong office. I think you guys seriously underestimate how much Scott does actually check this stuff. Like, he would notice eventually that Mike was in the FNaF 3 office. He would have to check over his own book. And this book already confirms a lot of stuff. Mike Schmidt being Michael Afton, Michael being the FNaF 4 protagonist, Golden Freddy's name, and that's just off the top of my head. And if we can use the drawing of the puppet giving a little girl cake on the page that mentions Happiest Day as evidence that the Golden Freddy kid in Happiest Day is Cassidy, and that Cassidy's a girl in the games, it's only fair that Foxy being in the FNaF 3 office is evidence that Mike is the FNaF 3 guard. And that goes vice versa, by the way. I've also seen some people say that logbook being meta means this is irrelevant, but I don't really see how. If anything, it even makes more sense. It's since the logbook is a meta book meant to confirm lore, then Mike being in the FNaF 3 office should basically be confirmation. But then again, Hudson's mere existence puts a hole in this theory. And then I seem like a hypocrite because I believe Andrew is the one you should not have killed in the games, right? But some people say, oh, you know, it's just like a stand-in for Cassidy. I guess there is a difference between Andrew and Hudson, though. There was actual stuff in UCN to imply there was this new 7th spirit. And also, Andrew's story is clearly after UCN, while Hudson's story is like an alternate continuity type of thing, you know? Although there is the possibility that What Found is canon, and that it's like a prequel to FNaF 3, which I would just love to be the case. I really think that'd be some great world building, but, you know, I do think it's unlikely. But I've seen some ideas that maybe it's a sequel, and like Eleanor or Springtrap, which I actually like too. But, you know, I doubt either of those, unfortunately. So yeah, I guess it is a little bit different, but still. And, you know, there are other problems with Mike being in FNaF 3. In FFPS, William says this:
You may not recognize me at first, but I assure you, that's still me.
Some people use this line to say Mike couldn't be in FNaF 3 because why wouldn't he recognize Afton? But here's the thing we have to remember. This is Afton's line, not Mike. Afton looks different than he did in FFPS, so he is considering that maybe Mike won't recognize him. We don't know if Mike does or not. Although we definitely should, because, you know, he's the main character of this game. He doesn't like do anything. I don't know why Scott chose to have the main character not really like do anything, or like we don't learn his thoughts about what's happening in the game where he dies. But that's a video for a whole nother day. Oh, so we can pretty confidently say Afton does look different in universe. Sako said that Scraptrap's redesign is classified as a lore question by Scott, which most likely means there's a lore reason for it. And everyone else in this game has a canon explanation for their redesign, so why wouldn't William? So yeah, Mike may not recognize William, but it's still Springtrap. I just feel like this line is probably talking to the player, basically saying that even though Springtrap looks different, it's still Springtrap. This especially makes sense when we remember that Mike Trap was a big debate at the time of this game's development, so this line would basically serve to debunk that theory. Some people also take issue with Michael's speech and sister location, saying that setting up William and Michael's meeting in FFPS, not showing the outcome of their meeting for FNaF 3, which is the most common interpretation of this cutscene. Now, I do agree this is setting up FFPS, but could it not be serving a double purpose? Showing the outcome of Michael finding his father while also showing that they're going to meet again in FFPS? Maybe that's why, and this is a stretch, Mike says, I'm going to come find you twice, because he's going to find Afton twice. But yeah, like I said, that's a stretch. He probably just said, I'm going to come find you twice, because just saying it once sounds kind of unnatural. So, you know, This is like where I was whenever I made that Fright Guard video. I'm still, pretty in between. I'm confident Mike is the guard, and I guess Hudson could be his own independent character in his own continuity. He just isn't Mike because Scott didn't want to write about Mike for some reason. But, at the same time, that Scott did say Frights was made to clear up things from the past, fill in the blanks, and then you have the story about the guard. I don't know. The real thing is, the Mike and Hudson debate both come down to books. So whichever one you think is better evidence, I guess you can take it. I'd take the logbook is probably better because, that is clearing up stuff from the games already, and I feel like... But still is Frights, so, I don't know, I just feel like it was intentional to have Mike in the FNaF 3 office. So, yeah. Do you remember when this video was about why Mike isn't Fritz Smith? So, yeah. Recently, I've seen this odd spike in people believing that Michael Afton isn't the FNaF 6 protagonist. It's not become a major belief in the community or anything, but I still see it more than I used to, which was never. So I thought I would make this quick video about why Mike is the FNaF 6 player for those guys, but also the only other person it could be. The evidence for Mike being the protagonist mostly comes from death lines. When Molten Freddy kills you, he says, "Together again," which obviously means he knows the protagonist. And since we know Molten Freddy is Ennard, and Ennard obviously knows Mike, it definitely points in favor of Mike being the player. Molten Freddy also has another line. "One big happy family." This makes sense with Mike being the player since FNaF 6 is basically an Afton-Emily family reunion. There's also Scrap Baby's line,
"It feels like home."
Building off of the family reunion idea, it would feel like home because all of her family is there. Her father, her brother, and it's heavily theorized that the bite victim is in Molten Freddy too. And Mrs. Afton, she somehow possesses Ballora. Although some people use Scrap Baby's line,
"You're not who I expected to see,"
is evidence for Mike not being the player, but this doesn't really make sense. We know Baby was already at FFPS at least once before the game started, so she was probably just expecting a random person, not her older brother. Now, I will admit it is a bit odd that Elizabeth kills Mike when it's implied in last game she saved him, with her repeating, "You won't die before Mike gets up," but maybe it was out of loyalty to her father. Another point towards Mike being the guard is that Afton speaks like he knows who the player is. He also taunts the player with the line,
Fascinating. What they have become.
Implying that he knows the player knows who they are, the spirits possessing the animatronics. It also might imply he expects the protagonist to agree with him that it's fascinating what's happened to them, maybe because he sent him to his experiment bunker. William also says this line,
How can I resist a promise such as this?
A lot of people think William is talking about the promise to murder more children, but this makes a little sense since William reveals he knows FNaF 6 is a trap. I think it's more likely William is talking about Mike's promise to find and most likely kill him. Maybe even being one of the multiple reasons Afton stays in the building when realistically he should have been able to just leave, since Scrap Baby did at the start of the game. He wants to see just what Mike plans to do. How does he know this? I don't know, I just think it makes sense. Maybe Mike and William met before FFPS, or maybe Mike recorded his speech on an audio log and Afton later heard it. Furthermore, Henry thinks the player wants to die with everyone at the end of the game, which would make sense if he was a depressed man who has been with Freddy since the start and witnessed his family be destroyed by his father's misdeeds, while also most likely blaming himself in some way for everything, and was also a purple corpse. More evidence is that the protagonist is willing to risk their life day after day to keep the animatronics contained in the building, which makes sense with Mike being the player because as hand unit says, Mike has
a genuine disregard for instinctive self-preservation.
Also, Mike being the owner of Freddy's makes sense with his character, as he is a foil to William, and they already have multiple narrative parallels, so both running a Freddy's could just be another one. Mike running a Freddy's also brings his character full circle. He possibly indirectly caused a majority of the tragedies related to Freddy's, but in the end, he manages to run a successful Freddy's location where no one dies. Well, except for 2 people who wanted to die. Also, Mike being the player is just logical with Sister Location's ending, where Mike says he's going to find Afton, and then Afton jumps on screen, setting up FNaF 6. If Mike isn't the FNaF 6 player, he has to be the FNaF 3 one. And not only that, but he kinda has to die in FNaF 3 during the fire to explain why he isn't in FFPS. Not only is that a worse ending for his character than FNaF 6, but it also doesn't make sense since nothing in FNaF 3 implies the guard dies in the fire. You'd think if he did, the newspapers at the end of the game would have said something. Mike can still be the FNaF 3 guard, although he probably isn't. He must go to FFPS either way though, since, well, everything I just talked about. Also, I don't have an image for this, but apparently in Security Breach there's a Foxy plushie hidden in the walls in the FFPS location. Mike is connected to Foxy for obvious reasons. Now, like I said, I don't have an image of this, so you just have to take my word on it. Finally, in UCN during OMC's dialogue, you can hear this, which sounds like William screaming. It's unknown what exactly he's saying, but what we can make out for sure is Mike, and it sounds like he's either screaming for help or that he hates Mike. Now, let me ask you this. Why would he be screaming to Mike for help if he wasn't one of the last people he saw? And why would he be screaming that he hates Mike unless he blames Mike for the current situation he's in? So yeah, that's all evidence for Mike being the player in FFPS. It's kind of crazy to have to make this video, but honestly, since FNAF 6 tried to keep Mike being the player a secret for some reason, and it's still not technically confirmed, I can't blame people for thinking maybe the real twist is that Mike isn't the player. Especially since the last game had a twist of the player too. Two twists, actually. First, you thought you were just playing as a random guy, then you were led to believe you were playing as William, and then at the end, you learned no, you were playing as Michael, his son. And speaking of the idea that Mike isn't the player, there's only one other character I could see for being the FFPS player if Scott's just an extremely shitty writer and chose not to have Mike be there when his family is set to rest. Although I guess it does have the benefit of Mike still being around today. That character is Cassie's dad. It's heavily implied that Cassie's dad is not only the Bonnie bully, but an employee at Circus Babies. The evidence is the out-of-place Circus Baby elevator in Princess Quest 4 and one of Baby's lines in Help Wanted 2. I recognize you. In Sister Location, Baby says,
I don't recognize you. You are new.
Him working at Circus Babies can explain Molten Freddy's lines. They are together again from the time Cassie's dad worked there. Afton recognizing the player also makes sense since Cassie's dad was his son's friend as a kid. Henry implying the protagonist wants to rest is kinda odd, but who knows? Maybe Cassie's dad does want to rest but just chooses not to, taking Henry's way out. Cassie's dad is also a huge fan of Freddy's, so him running a new Freddy's makes sense. He would want to bring the franchise back. Cassie's dad being the manager also makes a little more sense than Mike, honestly, since as a manager Mike would have to, interact with people, which could be difficult as a purple corpse. Also, Cassie's dad envisions the FNAF 6 location at its peak in Help Wanted 2 when he has on the Van Eye mask, perhaps implying that he worked at the FFPS location. Maybe the Foxy plush is just a random Easter egg. Or maybe Cassie's dad is the Fright Guard, and in the logbook, the Fright Guard is represented by Foxy. I don't know, it's just an idea. I think you can make a compelling argument for him being the FNAF 6 player. Well, okay, compelling in quotation marks, because he definitely isn't, unless it was a retcon. Mike being the player just makes more sense, and it's clearly what Scott is going for. I won't even consider it a theory, it's fact. Maybe Cassie's dad worked at the FFPS location since we know Mike wasn't the only one working there. He could be the handyman Mike hires. One of the most disturbing moments in the Five Nights at Freddy's series is Fruity Maze, which shows the luring of Susie, the child who possesses Chica. And while this is obviously a very sad moment in the series, I've always thought to myself, why show Susie? Why not show the origin of Cassidy, who is the main missing kid? In fact, why does Susie have so much importance? I've always thought it was just a weird decision, but what if it wasn't? What if Susie is shown because Susie in particular is important to the story of FNAF 6? What if Susie is Molten Freddy? Which I know sounds like a stretch, but think about it. It's heavily implied that the spirits of the original missing children are within Molten Freddy, so Susie is there anyway. And like I said, Susie is given extra importance for some reason. It also seems like the 3 lore mini-games are related to the main characters of FNAF 6. Midnight Motorist would be William and Michael. Security Puppet would be Henry and Charlie. Elizabeth doesn't get a minigame about her, but the opening minigame does lead into her appearance, so she's covered for. So Fruity Maze has to be Molten Freddy, which we could already figure out. Maybe it's showing Susie in particular because she is in control of Molten Freddy. What really gave me this idea was the scrapped Chica in the logbook. People assume this is a scrapped character for FNAF 6, but that never really made sense to me. What if instead it is a teaser for FNAF 6 and is showing us that Chica is important to the game? And then I realized that maybe Scott has been trying to tell us this for years. As I'm sure we all know, for some reason Susie gets content related to her all the time. Compared to every other missing kid, she has the most content. She gets a Fright story all about her, she's the first MCI victim, she gets a secret code in Funkle Fusion. I'm surprised there wasn't a Susie script for the movie. Maybe the reason Susie always gets the most content is because she is one of the main antagonists of FNAF 6. Now there are some obvious questions with this theory. 1, why is she choosing to represent herself with Freddy and not Chica? And 2, why Susie? The first one's pretty easy to answer, she's just corrupted by the AI. The second one though, I have no idea. I really don't. I feel like the obvious choices for Molten Freddy would be Cassidy and the bite victim. Cassidy because she is Golden Freddy, who has a huge focus in the games, so it makes sense for her to be one of the main antagonists of the final game. And BV makes the most sense because FNAF 6 has this theme of family reunion, so BV will be reuniting with his family. Susie though is just so random. Why her? Is she secretly an Emily? Gender-bent Sammy? Almost certainly not, because we meet her family in the Fazbear's Fright story Coming Home. There's also debunks her being an Afton, which I don't even know what anyone will consider, so why her? And like I said, I have no clue. The only thing I can think of is that Scott was just trolling us. Chica was easily the most unpopular character before FNAF 6, so he made her one of the most important characters in FNAF 6. It might also be to make up for Chica not being in Sister Location. but like I said, I'm really not sure. With the recent release of the Help Wanted 2 update, I've been looking back on the story of this game, and I've come to a disturbing realization that has even more evidence in the update. You see, in this game, we play as Cassie's dad, who is all but confirmed to be the Bonnie Bully from FNaF 4, while he plays some kind of training simulation for Fazbear Entertainment. There are two endings in this game. The first is where the staff bots kill Cassie's dad, leading to the mask bot giving Cassie the Vanny mask, or the Princess Quest 4 ending, where Cassie's dad helps find the memory dolls and gives up the Vanny mask to give Vanessa Glitchtrap's plush so she can kill him. It's then implied he stays in the arcade cabin. So the question is, which ending is canon? Ever since the game has come out, I assume Maskbot, or as it's called in the files, Help Trap, was the canon ending, just because it directly led into Ruin. However, with the release of the new update, I don't think that's true anymore. You see, I believe that both endings are canon, and let me explain why. Before I do that, I have to ask you guys to subscribe, because only 90% of people who watch my videos are subscribed. And you know what? I think those numbers are too low. I think we gotta get them up, so definitely subscribe and help me out. First, allow me to explain why the Princess Quest 4 ending is canon. With the new update, we got new Mr. Hippo lines. These lines mostly relate to our new main antagonist, the Mimic.
Something has changed. A hidden performer is ready to take a bow. Must be spry. Tomatoes are in short supply. We toss whatever may be by. A solid hit will make one cry.
These lines seem to be talking about the Mimic as a hidden performer. And he was a hidden performer. He was hidden as Glitchtrap, a performance he put on. And we know the Mimic is connected to Glitchtrap in some way because Glitchtrap gives us the Tiger Rock memory doll. Tiger Rock is something only the Mimic could know of. The Mimic was already referred to as a sad performer, so he is most likely also the hidden performer. Like I said, he was hidden as Glitchtrap. But when Vanessa killed Glitchtrap, the Mimic was restored to his original form, and Glitchtrap took a bow, because he was like done performing. This means the update takes place at least after the Princess Quest 4 ending. And since the Help Trap ending leads into Ruin, that ending must be canon too. And I know you don't have to 100% the game to access the updated content, but I still feel like there's a clear chronological order here. But the question is, does the update happen before or after Help Trap? Well, almost certainly after, because Mr. Hippo says, if the update is our second night at work, wouldn't our first night at work be the main game? And yeah, this is also a clue to access the Tiger Rock doll on night 2 of the Sister Location Custom Night, but I don't see why I can't have a double meaning. Also, Glitchtrap appears in the Help Trap ending, meaning he hasn't been killed yet. This means Cassie's dad was already dead by the time of Princess Quest 4. I also think that the Vanny mask we give OMC at the end of Princess Quest 4 may have been Cassie's dad's way to move on, only because it was supposed to be a trade, but I don't know, it's just an idea. However, we have to ask, was Cassie's dad dead throughout the entire game? Or was he still alive before the Help Trap ending? Well, it's difficult to tell, but I think we can assume he was dead throughout the entire game because of one of Mr. Hippo's lines.
Do you ever look at your hands? I mean, really look at your hands.
When we look at our hands, they are blue. Well, in VR. If you're on flat mode, then you can't see the hands anyway. Which makes sense because we have the Vanny mask on for the first half of the game. But take the mask off, and our hands are still blue. Mr. Hippo is telling us to look at our hands because she's trying to tell us we are dead and always have been. Help Trap seems to be Cassie's dad remembering his death. Maybe the Faz Force figures somehow contain his memories, and putting them together reminds him of his death. And maybe not only his death, but why he's down there in the first place, to kill Glitchtrap, which is something else Mystic Hippo tries to help us remember, telling us that she needs us, she most likely being the princess or Vanessa, and all these other voice lines as well.
You must help. Why are you here? When are you? It needs you. She needs you. Do you remember?
She is literally asking us if we remember something. So yeah, it does seem very likely that Cassie's dad has to remember why he's down there. He forgot. As William said in the Silver Eyes, the dead do forget. I think Cassie's dad possesses not only the Maskbot, who we can tell he possesses because of the ending and because Maskbot has Bonnie ears, but also the Help Wanted 2 training simulation itself. He is playing the minigames after he is dead. Some of them may even be influenced by his own memories, for instance the Sister Location minigames. Since it is pretty heavily implied that Cassie's dad was a previous Circus Baby employee, even in the update, where Mystic Hippo tells us a gift awaits us in the distant past, most likely being Cassie's dad's distant past. And where do we find the gift? the sister location, levels. This explains how the update can even happen in the first place. The Mimic is most likely connected to the simulation as well, since we see in the game that Glitchtrap does have some influence on the levels, as he can give us the memory dolls, so he is in there somehow. And he's showing Cassie's dad his memories because he's bored, I guess? I mean, it's not like he has anyone else down there, anything else to do. Might as well hang out with the guy he killed. This means that Cassie's dad somehow escaped the Princess Quest 4 machine, probably because his soul still lingered in the simulation. So basically, Cassie's dad is trapped here forever. Using this, I think I have a pretty good idea of Help Wanted 2's story. Sometime after Security Breach, but before Ruin, Cassie's dad goes to the Pizzaplex. I think he went to kill Glitchtrap, since I think he is Jeremy from Help Wanted 1, and I think the Candy Cadet story in Help Wanted 2 is about him, but I explained that in a previous video. He went there to kill Glitchtrap, maybe even being in contact with Vanessa, which is why he helps her out in the Princess Quest 4 ending. And if I'm right about him being Jeremy, they were both, people who fell under the control of Glitchtrap, so, they would definitely probably want to help each other out. He goes down there with his Vanny mask on, and the Helpy software is helping him out. However, he is then killed by Glitchtrap and possesses the mask bot and the Help Wanted 2 simulation itself. And I also think he probably died with the mask on because we start the game with the mask on. Maskbot takes the Vanny mask to the surface to wait for Cassie. Now trapped in the simulation, Jeremy plays minigames to unlock the Fast Force figures and finds clues to unlock Glitchtrap's memory dolls. He does this, is reminded of his death, and then plays the Princess Quest 4 machine to help kill Glitchtrap. After killing Glitchtrap, he is brought back to the hub. The next day, the Mimic, restored back to its original form, decides to keep Jeremy entertained by making him go on a fetch quest to put together a puzzle that reveals some of the Mimic's past. I think it's likely that in a potential Ruin sequel, Cassie will find her dad wandering the FNaF 6 location or something, and may even be able to help him move on and set him free. But I don't know, that's just an idea. And yeah, that's basically what I think Help Wanted 2's endings are about. I think they're basically both canon, and there's basically no good ending to this game. Either way, Cassie's dad is still dead. There's no way to save him, really. He's just stuck there forever until a future game where maybe someone helps him move on. I don't know. I'm pretty certain of this theory, except that the update maybe isn't canon, I don't know, I just threw that in there. But even if the update isn't canon, I still think it gives evidence that both the endings do happen in the game. Because it does show that the Mimic has gone back to its original form after Glitchtrap, which does point towards the Princess Quest 4 ending being canon, because that is the one where Glitchtrap dies, like straight up dies. And then Help Trap is probably canon just because it leads into Ruin. That's such an obvious ending. I feel like it is canon, so both are canon. FNaF 2, despite being the most irrelevant game, did introduce some of the most iconic characters in the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise. JJ, RWQ, some of them are even important, like Shadow Freddy. There's also the Wizards, who are by far some of the creepiest animatronics in the series, but none of them are more iconic than the puppet, but this video isn't about her. Some other iconic characters were the newly introduced Toy Animatronics, who, much like the classics, are a perfect mix between endearing and creepy. They really are animatronics I could see being at a kid's pizza place. One of them was more popular than the others, but they all stood out in their own ways. Except BB, everyone kinda hated him. Oh, and Toy Freddy wasn't the most popular.
NF number 8 is that Toy Freddy, he's kinda, fat. I mean, come on, come on, what can I say?
And despite their popularity, they aren't really that talked about when it comes to theorizing. There's only really two theories that pop to mind when concerning these characters. Who built them, William or Henry, and if they are possessed. And if so, by whom? The last one is what I want to talk about today, so let's do it, I guess. I don't really have a transition. For some background, the other theory besides the toys being possessed is that they are purely acting based on their AI, and they're trying to kill Jeremy because of their faulty facial recognition, or because they were never given a proper night mode. Basically what Ralph says on night 1.
While our engineers don't really have an explanation for this, the working theory is that the robots were never given a proper night mode. So when it gets quiet, they think they're in the wrong room. So then they go try to find where the people are, and in this case, that's your office.
And that's basically the argument for the toys being AI. That's what Ralph said they were. So all I have to say is, I guess the animatronics in FNaF 1 saw you as a naked endoskeleton without its costume on. I mean, if we're taking Ralph's word as gospel, that must be what's happening. But wait, we know that's not true, since they don't stuff the actual endoskeleton in FNaF 1, and they're possessed by the souls of angry dead children. So clearly Ralph is not a reliable source. He means well, but he just isn't. Not only that, but the toys are clearly possessed. Look at these renders of Toy Freddy and Chica. Notice anything that might stand out compared to their usual selves? Their eyes are blacked out, which is just like what the animatronics in the last game did. Those animatronics are possessed. There's even more evidence to support the toys being possessed. In FNaF ARE, when the character of Mangle was introduced, there's an email that talks about how they couldn't recreate him climbing on the wall. This implies that Mangle was possessed, since if she was only acting on his AI, they should be able to recreate the wall crawling. But they can't. So yeah, the toys are pretty clearly possessed. Now hopefully Toy's AI can die in peace. But that's not the end. We still have to figure out who is possessing the toys. But before we do that, I have to ask you guys to like and subscribe because I am trying to hit 2K before the end of February. And subscribing would just help me out a ton. There are two main theories as to who possesses the toys. The original 5 children murdered by William Afton years before the events of FNaF 2, nicknamed the MCI, or the new set of murders that happened in this game, nicknamed the DCI. Let's go over the theory that they are possessed by the MCI first. The idea spawns from Ralph saying that the toys were made using parts from the Wizards.
By now I'm sure you've noticed the older models sitting in the back room. Those are from the previous location, and we just use them for parts now.
And the fact that the DCI never really get a proper ending. They just kind of show up and that's it. Hell, there's some people who think the DCI never happened at all. It does though, the DCI happening is a pretty important part of FNaF 2's story. That's the main evidence for Toy's MCI, that I know of. I disagree with this theory for a few reasons. First of all, the whole idea that the parts of the MCI in the toys possesses them and cause them to act up at night. That's not exactly how that works. It's more complicated. There's this great video by Glitchexity that explains that soul splitting isn't that simple. The spirits have to be willing to travel to a new vessel. Make sure to check out that video for a more in-depth explanation. But I actually disagree with the theory for a simpler reason. The DCI exists. Think about it from a storytelling point of view. Why would Scott introduce a new set of kids who died at the FNaF 2 location in a game with a new set of animatronics who act up at night and are clearly possessed if these new animatronics were just possessed by the old set of kids? That would make the DCI completely irrelevant, and they're already really irrelevant. Like, seriously, I feel like it's pretty clear what Scott was going for here. I know some people take issue with how the DCI never do anything again and never get a proper conclusion, but I'd argue they actually do get one in FNaF 2 itself. At the end of the game, the toys are scrapped, and I feel like this is most likely supposed to indicate the DCI being free, giving the DCI an ending in the game they're introduced in. This is why they never get focused on again. They moved on as quickly as they possessed the animatronics. At most, we could push them moving on to the FNaF 3 Fire, since their shells are in that game, but it doesn't really matter either way. The truth is, and not a lot of people want to accept this, DCI are just a plot device for the story of FNaF 2 to work. They were never going to be actually fleshed out characters. Hell, the MCI aren't even fleshed out characters. Their purpose is to possess the toys, and that's it. Now, there are some other arguments against Toys DCI. I know one is people believing the DCI happens after Night 5 and before Night 6, which contradicts the toys being possessed by them since they are active as early as Night 1. But the DCI is actually first mentioned on, I think, Night 3, with Ralph telling us about false rumors.
Oh hey, before I go, I wanted to ease your mind about any rumors you might have heard lately. You know how these local stories come and go and seldom mean anything. I can personally assure you that whatever is going on out there, however tragic it may be, has nothing to do with our establishment. It's just all rumor and speculation, people trying to make a buck, you know. Our guard during the day has reported nothing unusual, and he's on watch from opening till close.
It's then said an investigation is going on, and then the day guard, who was the previous night guard, leaves suddenly.
Okay, so just to update you, there's been somewhat of an investigation going on. We may end up having to close for a few days, I don't know. I want to emphasize, though, that it's really just a precaution. Fazbear Entertainment denies any wrongdoing. These things happen sometimes. From what I understand, the building is on lockdown. No one is allowed in or out, you know, especially concerning any previous employees. When we get it all sorted out, we may move you to the day shift. A position just became available.
The DCI seems to have happened at night, since no one is around, and that's clearly a security guard killing them. So the DCI happened the week before Jeremy's shift. Rumors are going around, probably about kids who went missing just as they knew Freddy's opened its doors. And then the cops start investigating the location, and William goes on the run, probably because he knew the cops were close to finding something, which they do. That's why Ralph was freaking out during the Night 6 call.
Hello? What on earth are you doing there? Didn't you get the memo? The place is closed down, at least for a while. Someone used one of the suits. We had a spare in the back, a yellow one. Someone used it. Now none of them are acting right.
So yeah, the DCI happened before the game. Also, something else people take issue with when it comes to the DCI visiting the toys is that they were never stuffed, which is just a non-issue. First of all, we're clearly not seeing the entire incident. There's definitely more that has to happen after this, since William does hide the bodies. Or you could argue Fazbear Entertainment were the ones who hid the bodies. Also, Charlie possessed the puppet, and she was never stuffed into it. The crying child possesses an animatronic in the week before, and he died in a hospital. Also, we see that Mangle's already moving during the minigame. perhaps implying the DCI are already starting to possess the toys. I also know there's that theory where the only DCI victim is Cassidy. I disagree with that for a few reasons. First of all, it relies on the assumption that Charlie was the 5th kid in the MCI, which, I mean, it's possible she never went missing. She was straight up murdered. Like, they would have found her body. It was just left in the alley. William didn't hide it. Also, Golden Freddy was clearly the 5th kid during FNaF 1, so this would have to be the retcon Scott talked about. In case you don't know, before FNaF 6 came out, Scott confirmed there was one retcon in the series. Although Scott's definition of retcon seems to be a little different than what it actually is. His definition seems to be anything that's changing something that's already been confirmed. So for example, Mike Schmidt being the son of the killer, that is a retcon, but Scott wouldn't consider it a retcon because it wasn't already confirmed in the series. But it does recontextualize FNaF 1. Take that as you will. Anyways, he would retcon the puppet kid into being the 5th kid and just never imply it anywhere again, since in the novels, Golden Freddy is the 5th kid, in the movie, Golden Freddy is the 5th kid, and that's a continuity where we know the puppet exists, so yeah. Also, like, there's clearly 5 kids in the DCI, and it's not just like the MCI apparitions. Since the puppet is asking us to save them, we can't save them if they're already ghosts and they're already dead, which actually probably implies that the DCI were still somewhat alive when Freddy was moving around, which is actually pretty sad to think about. And yeah, that's it. The toys are possessed, and they are possessed by the DCI because literally, why would they exist if not to explain the toys moving around? And then they move on after being scrapped, or more likely the FNaF 3 fire, since their shells are still around. I know some people think they're in Lefty, but I disagree with that theory. I think if they were, Henry probably would have said something, like how he talked about the MCI in his Insanity speech. But to be honest, I'm perfectly fine with Lefty DCI. I'm actually fine with any DCI theory besides them not existing, because like I said, they really don't matter. Sure, the DCI are in the monitor, whatever. I used to like the theory that DCI were in Scrap Trap back in the day. He repaired himself with the shells from FNaF 3. I thought it was cool, but whatever. Midnight Motorist is by far one of, if not the most confusing minigames in the Five Nights at Freddy's series. There are many videos going over this minigame. I've even made one. You might be wondering why I decided to make another one. Has my mind changed or something? Well, no, I still agree with everything I said in that video, and you should watch that one before continuing this one. No, the reason I'm making this video is because I had an epiphany at work. A huge problem people have with Midnight Motorist being about the Aftons from a narrative perspective is, what is it clearing up? And I've never had a problem with this since I thought it was pretty clear. It was clearing up the death order. If Crying Child is the runaway, it's confirming Charlie died first. If it's a Michael, sure, Charlie could still die first, but it would be a bit odd, so it would probably be showing the Crying Child died first. And I still do think this minigame was, in part, made to clarify this, but I thought about it a little deeper, and I realized this minigame could be clearing up Five Nights at Freddy's 4 as a whole, the most confusing game up to this point. Well, with my interpretation of it anyway. Like I said, watch my previous video, understand my perspective, but the basic rundown is I think we're playing as William after he kills Charlie. He drives home to see that Michael has run away. Mike was following Shadow Freddy to see Charlie's corpse. And Mrs. Afton is the person on the couch, and the mound is the Crying Child's grave. How does any of this clear up FNaF 4? Well, just hear me out. Let's talk about how this minigame clears up FNaF 4's gameplay first. Midnight Motorist clears up FNaF 4's gameplay by doing the basic plot, but earlier. We have Shadow Freddy going to Mike's house and terrorizing him by bringing him to Freddy's or Fredbear's and putting him in the Crown Child's position of seeing something scary at this place. This is pretty similar to the common interpretation of FNaF 4's gameplay, where Shadow Freddy as Nightmare follows Mike home sometime after FNaF 1 and terrorizes him by putting him in the Crown Child's position of being a child terrified of animatronics, and how I interpret it, also showing him the consequences of his actions by putting him in the nightmare experience. Something likely made in response to the Crying Child's death. Notice how I said Shadow Freddy showing Mike the consequences of his actions in FNaF 4? I think he might be doing something similar in Midnight Motorist. I've recently started to consider that Charlie's death may have been more planned out than we once thought, and that it was William's first attempt to somewhat recreate what happened to the Crying Child before the experiments. I guess I should come in here real quick and explain my interpretation of Afton's motives. Basically what I think is, I think he was trying to put the Crying Child back together, right? But I don't think he actually did it out of love. I think he just did it to learn more about the paranormal, so that's why he's trying to recreate the Crying Child's experiences. The Nightmare experience in particular show us this. The whole point was to put children in these rooms, in these experiences where they would be constantly scared and would not have any normal life to balance it out. Similar to the Crying Child, where he was always terrified, even in his real life, he was still scared all of the time. So while it's not confirmed, I do think it's very likely William made the experience like this to try to recreate what happened to the Crying Child, learn a little more about it. There's something important to consider. Keypad and sister location, the code to view the cameras for the experience is 1983, so something with the experiments has to relate back to 1983. Well, that's just what I think, you know, it's not confirmed, but I think it's very likely. So yeah, I just had to come in here real quick and say that's my view of Afton's motives at this time, and that's why he could kill Charlie, to try and recreate what's happening with the Crying Child at this point, just trying to learn more about it. Notice how in the security puppet minigame, Charlie is obviously being bullied, which is similar to the Crying Child. They were both bullied. And this detail was was only added in FNaF 6. Nothing in Take Cake to the Children implied that the kid outside was being, like, bullied or, like, actively locked out. It just, like, seemed like they were just locked out. But we see in this minigame that the kids, they see Charlie outside. They just kind of leave her outside, leave her locked out, which does imply that they probably locked her out, or that, you know, they are bullying her, or they just don't give a shit. The puppet also has boxes placed on top of its box. Could they have been placed there intentionally? I think it's possible that William did plan to kill Charlie that night, and he was trying to figure out how to start recreating what happened to the crying child. So he kills her because they were both bullied by their peers, you know, pretty similar. Now I know that in the novel trilogy, William killed Charlie due to his hatred for Henry, but I think there's something important to consider here. The crying child doesn't exist in the novels, so to have William kill Charlie, there has to be an alternative motive. And also, William can still kill Charlie due to his hatred. He would just also be using Charlie's death as his first attempt to recreate what happened with the crying child. And then Shadow Freddy is bringing Mike here to basically show him the outcome of his actions. And while sure, William may have killed Charlie anyway, Mike has no way of knowing that. Also, I should say, I think Shadow Freddy might also have been trying to recreate Charlie's death, since it does seem he recreates William's actions. For example, in Follow Me, he recreates the MCI, and then in FNaF 4, he puts Mike in the experiments. Or maybe Shadow Freddy's like William's evil, right? Maybe William wanted to manipulate Michael into believing everything was his fault so he could work for him, and that's what Shadow Freddy's doing. That's if you believe Mike is an accomplice to well, accomplice in quotation marks, since I don't think Mike knew William was a killer until Sister Location, but I just want to throw that in there real quick. And if my whole idea of William trying to recreate what happened with the crying child with Charlie is wrong, then scratch this, I guess. Midnight Motorist is still explaining the basic gameplay. But that's not all this minigame explains. Midnight Motorist also clears up what's going on with the minigames. But before we talk about how it does that, I have to ask you guys to subscribe. I'm trying to hit 3K before the end of April. Social Blade says it's going to take us 4 months, but I know we can do it in 2. So come on, subscribe and help me out. So how does Midnight Motorist explain what's going on with the minigames? Well, first, let's take a look at William in this minigame. He is yellow. It has long been questioned, why is he yellow? Why not purple or pink? We've all basically agreed it was most likely something to do with Mike Trap. And sure, that's probably a reason, but you still could have made him pink, so why yellow? Well, what if you made William yellow to connect William with the Fredbear plush? I mean, think about it. The minigame is clearly about FNaF 4 in some way. I know what you're thinking. William was already connected to the plush in Sister Location. And that's true. Scott would just be reinforcing the connection. And now, to end it off, let's talk about how Midnight Motorist explains what the point of FNaF 4's minigames was. In case you don't know what I think was going on with these minigames, I think the crying child left a mark on the world that went on to influence the rest of the franchise by making CC's memories real. Or like his fears and his memories play out throughout the rest of the series. I explained it more in depth in my Dream Theory Was Never Canon video, but basically, Dream Theory was never canon, so the Dream Theory hints have to mean something else. And the Silver Eyes introduces the concept of memories lingering. Watch the video, I explain it much better there. Anyway, Midnight Motorist will be showing this with Mike seeing Charlie's corpse. How does this clear this up? Remember how I said Mike is being put in the crying child's position of seeing something scary at Fredbear's? Yeah, that's pretty much it. The crying child's experiences and memories are coming to life. The difference is that unlike what the crying child saw, this is real. It isn't something to be misunderstood. Someone was really murdered. But whatever the crying child saw, we knew it was something that he misunderstood because of that thing on the Scott Games website was seeing the shadows as easily misunderstood in the mind of a child. Like how in FNaF 4, there are rumors of animatronics stuffing people into suits and coming alive at night. But they don't do that. But years later, animatronics come to life at night and start stuffing people into suits. Also, I just want to say this. I think Mike seeing Charlie's corpse was supposed to tie into Mike's motivations in some way, since I have done some thinking and I've realized that Mike working at Freddy's in FNaF 1 just for a job doesn't really make sense, just because of his personal connection with the place. I'm not sure if he would want to work there just for money. There have to have been other places hiring, right? Unless Mike worked at Freddy's to try and make sense of what he saw a decade prior. Except that also, I kind of have a problem with that. Like, that was a decade ago and that was at like a different location. I don't know why he would work there now because of it. I don't know. I don't know. I've been trying to make sense of it. So yeah, I guess this is it. This is more just me rambling, but this idea came to me at work and I just knew I had to make a video about it. I definitely do think Scott was probably trying to clarify the entirety of FNaF 4 with this minigame. I'm not sure if I'm entirely right, but maybe I can get some other people thinking and like discussion about it, who knows. Even if I'm wrong, I still want to make this video. But you know what isn't wrong? You subscribing to my channel and commenting down below what you think of this, I don't know, can we call it a theory? Make sure to like too, and I'll see you guys next time.